In this video, I'm going to go through the basics of using a DSLR camera. Now, there are a lot of buttons on these cameras and a lot of settings that you need to be aware of, and in my opinion, I think using a DSLR camera can be harder than learning how to drive a car, because there's so much to learn, and to get it right, you need to know a lot about using a DSLR camera. Although there is an automatic setting on the camera, it's not the photographs are never going to be perfect for every situation. I mean, they might be perfect and say if it's a nice sunny day, but in other situations the automatic setting is not going to be perfect. So to use a DSLR camera, you'll need to learn about the different modes you can use, such as the manual mode, the aperture priority mode, and the speed dial mode, and the program mode. I'll go into more about the modes in a later video, but for this video is going to be mostly about the buttons and the settings on a DSLR camera, because these are the first things that you'll need to learn. So I just want to show you this is the manual that came, the part of the manual. I've just printed off a couple of sheets here. So part of the manual that came with the DSLR camera, and so you can see just by looking at this, all of these buttons here, this tells you what every button is. And then you've got all the buttons on the back. So there's quite a lot to take in with a DSLR camera. So I'm going to try and make it as easy for you to follow as possible, because if you're new to using DSLR cameras, you need to know the basics. Start with the basics and then you can build up after that. So let's start with the front of the camera. So when you get your camera, it might come with a lens already attached. You might get a lens, might not already be attached, but you might get a lens in the pack. You might not get a lens in the pack. So if you don't get a lens in the pack, you'll need to buy a lens. This is the cheapest lens. I think it's the cheapest lens you can get for the Canon camera. For this particular Canon anyway, the 90D. And this is the Canon lens 50mm 1:1:8. And so this lens is it's a fixed lens, so it's not a zoom lens. You can't zoom in and out with it. It stays at that 50mm setting, but you can get some really good images from it. So this lens is really should be in everybody's pack, because it's very good for portraits. You can get a blurred background with it because it goes down to 1 point, I think it's 1 point. Let me just see what aperture it goes down to, because I can't remember. Looks what, 1.8. So the aperture goes down to 1.8, so that means you can get nice blurred backgrounds with it. And you do get quite a sharp image with it as well. So it's only cost, I think it only costs around £100 or something for one of these lenses. But you might have another lens that's come with your camera. So, but I would recommend you also get one of these, because they are very useful for all sorts of things, like street photography. You can use it for landscape photography as well, food photography, product photography, portrait photography. You can use these lenses for most things, and it's very cheap. And because it goes down to 1.8 aperture, it's going to give you lots of light in lower light settings, or nighttime photography as well. It would give you more light. So it's worth having one of these lenses if you haven't got one, that is. So the lens goes on the front. So how to put the lens on? It's got this button here, and you just press that button in, and then you just twist the lens off, and then to put the lens back on, you can see it lines up with the red dots. Now this particular lens is it's called an EF lens, and you see EF there on the lens. That means it's the EF lens fits any camera that has an EF setting. Not all cameras have EF settings. The newer cameras have different settings. And the reason why I got this camera, this 90D, was because my other camera, my 700D, was EF/ES settings, and so that means all the lenses I had for the other camera were going to fit onto this camera. So that was the main reason why I bought this camera. If I was going to buy one of the newer cameras, I would have had to change all of my lenses, which would have been expensive. So I decided to go for this one. So let me just go through the front of the camera. So that's how this button here is to take the lens off, and then you twist it on like a light bulb. Like just twist it in the clockwise direction, and to take it off you twist in the anti-clockwise direction. This is the shutter button. So when you take a picture, you hold it like this, and then you press the shutter button here. And we've got this little tiny button here, that's the flash, so you press that and the flash pops up. You've also got the hot shoe on the top here for speed lights, but I very rarely use this little flash setting. Maybe I should use it more. Right under here you've got the depth of field preview button. Now with the depth of field preview button, it's another button that I don't use enough. With this button, if you have it in live view mode, so if I switch this on and I have it in live view mode, so if this screen tilts out as well, so you can tilt it and twist it like that. So if I just twist it like that, then you'll be able to see what I'm doing. So I've got this set at 2.8 aperture, and you can see the flowers are in focus. These little artificial flowers are in focus. Let's just get the exposure right. And the clock in the background is out of focus, and that's with the live view. So this little flip screen is the live view. So I'm just going to show you really, I'll just take an image of that, and then if we go to the you can see the actual image is, you've got the flower in focus and you've got the clock blurred there. So that's with the 2.8 aperture. So if we wanted to say increase the aperture, so if I go to say 8 and I click on the flower, you can see in the live view, let's just see if you can see that a bit clearer if I zoom in a bit with the lens. So in the live view, if I click on the flower there with the little green square, you can see the flower's in focus but the clock's blurred. And if I take that image, and then if we have a look at that image that I've just taken, the clock isn't that blurred like it was when we saw it in the live view, because what we saw in the live view wasn't what you're going to see when you take the picture. So it looks like it's going to be blurred, and you're thinking to yourself before you take the image, that looks blurred, it looks like I'm going to have that clock blurred, and that's exactly what I want. But then when you come to look at your image, you see it's not blurred. So there is a fix for that with this little button at the front here. This is called the depth of, sorry, and I just have to zoom out a bit more. zoom out. So this button here at the bottom is the depth of field button. So when you've got it in live view and you focus on the flowers, like I want to do now, and you press that button, I'll just zoom it in again so you can see. So I'm gonna zoom on that white flower there. It looks like the clock's going to be blurry, but then if I press that depth of field button at the same time, you can see it changes and it gives you what it is going to look like. I'm going to leave go of the depth of field button, so I'll leave go of the depth of field button, and it looks like that clock's going to be blurry, but it's not. But to get the real view, if you click the depth of field button, and it shows you that the clock's not going to be blurry on the 8 aperture. And even if we turn the aperture up to say 22 and we focus on that flower, it still looks like the clock's going to be blurry, but if we press the depth of field button, it's definitely not going to be blurry. This little icon here, that's the lamp. It's the red eye reduction light, and it's also like the self timer light, and it's like the remote control lamp, if you're wondering what that is. So on the back of the camera, let's have a look at these. So we've got the menu button. Actually, well, let's have a look at the top first. So on the top, these are the different modes you can choose, and to turn this dial, you would need to, on this particular camera, you need to press that little button in the middle before you turn it, and then you can turn it like that. I usually use my settings in manual mode. So the mode dial, the M stands for manual, so you line it up with the little white dot there, so that means this is in manual mode now. If I turn it once anti-clockwise, I come to the AV mode, which is the aperture priority mode, and then we turn it again, we come to the TV mode, which is the speed mode, and then we've got program mode. And then this is the automatic, and this little green icon here, that's the automatic settings. This is the scene, so you can choose what scene you want. And you can see as well which mode you're using by, if you look on the, if we put this in, so if we put this in live view here, and then if I turn the button, if I go back to, that tells you when you're in the intelligent auto mode, and then we turn the button again, scene mode, and you can choose what scene you want by pressing on here. So you can choose portrait for portrait shots, backgrounds or blurred, subject stands out, smooth skin tone and hair, and then you can just have a scroll through these. There's lots of different modes here. To be honest, I've never really used the scene mode. I might have a go of it and see how we get on. And then we've got filters, creative filters here. So choose filter. So you have grainy black and white, you have soft focus, you have fisheye effect, you have water painting effect, toy camera effect, miniature effect, HDR art standard, images resemble paintings with low contrast, HDR vivid, just HDR with art bold, and HDR art embossed. So there's all of those filters as well. So this setting is like a custom setting. image. You might want to put a custom setting on here. So the next setting is the bulb setting. So exposure continues while shutter button is pressed. So instead of setting your shutter speed to more than 30 seconds, you can just use the bulb and you just press on the button and it takes the image as long as the button is pressed. Like if you held the button for 40 seconds, it would take 40 seconds. It would take the image for 40 seconds. And then back to manual mode. Custom settings, like if you say, for example, if you do sports shooting and you want to have your shutter speed set at a particular shutter speed and your aperture set at a particular aperture, you can have a custom setting. So then you can, if you're doing a sport, you can just automatically go to that. So for me, I'm going to set one of these settings so that it's for birds in flight, because often when I'm out and I see a bird flying and I want to take an image of the bird flying, I'm too late to quickly put my shutter speed really high in my ISO automatic for me to take the image of the bird, because you need fast shutter speeds to get the movement of the wings, otherwise you'll get blurry wings. And so I'm going to set one of these as like a bird in flight mode, so that if I do see a bird flying and I want to take a picture of it, I can just quickly go to that mode and snap without having to change the shutter speed, which will be very handy. And it could be the same for you, like if you were doing sports photography, for example, you would need a fast shutter speed for that. So to set your own custom setting is quite a good thing to have. So that's the mode dial. This obviously is the on and off button. So off is that way, on is this way. This is the hot shoe, where you put your flash, and you can put other things on the hot shoe, like a trigger to control your flashes with. And this is a dial that shows you what your particular settings are right now. So this screen here, it tells you what settings you've got at the moment. So if I turn this dial, you can see the shutter speed is now changing. If I turn this dial, you can see the aperture is now changing, and you can see what your current settings are by looking at that dial. So this is handy to see what your settings are already, but to be honest, me personally, I hardly ever look at this. I tend to look at my settings through the eyepiece or through the live view at the back, on the back screen. I very rarely use this, mainly because if I haven't got my reading glasses on, I can't see it. Because it is quite small, like the image. But if I've got my reading glasses on, I might use it, but I very rarely use it. This setting here is like an automatic setting for your AF, for your focus. So you can either have it on one shot, AI focus, or AI servo. I'll explain what all those are later. And then you've got the drive button here, which is, you can either have it on, let's just go back to the drive. You can either have it on single shooting, high speed continuous, low speed continuous, silent single shooting, silent continuous shooting. You can have the self timer. So this is 10 seconds, 2 seconds, and self timer continuous. I normally just keep it on single shooting unless I'm doing any kind of like if there's a lot of movement, then I might sometimes have it on that one. So we'll just leave it on this one shot at the moment. The ISO here, this is to, you can just automatically go to here to change your ISO settings. So you can change them from automatic and then up to the highest settings that it goes to, which is 25,600. I try to keep it at 100 because that is the best setting to use, the lowest setting. Sometimes I go to automatic if it's low light. And then this one is the metering mode. and you can choose whether you have it on spot metering, center weighted average, partial metering or evaluative metering. I'm just going to leave it on spot metering. And this little button lights your little screen up, so if you're in the dark and you can't see the screen, you can use that little button there to light it up. The problem I have with these is because I keep forgetting what order they're in. And if they were colour coded, it might be better, but because they're not, and if you're looking through here, and because the only reason you would use them really is if you were looking through here, and then you would quickly change your settings on the top there. So if you were looking through here, like the eyepiece, and you were trying to find the right button, it's quite fiddly to know. If you know it off by heart, you could learn it off by heart, but I haven't gone to the trouble of learning it off by heart. So I have to look at it before I choose. I tend to use it a lot for the ISO, so if I want to change the ISO quickly, I would press on that to change the ISO. So this dial, this is to dial your speed of your shot on there, and this little one is to select the zone that you want to focus on. You want at that part, you can just move it around where you want to have the main focus on your image. Say if you wanted, say if there was like a bird and you were focusing on the bird and you wanted the rest of the image to be this part of the bird, then you would have it focused here. You can have it just on one tiny little spot in the middle. You can have like a manual, you can actually select where you want it like this just by moving the dial along like this. You can have it like a large area, you can have a huge area. So that's the top of the camera. Oh, we've got this little button here, this little dial here. So if you look through there and the figures look blurry to you, you can turn this little dial till it's not blurry anymore. So this is called the viewfinder, this little bit here where you look through with your eye. It's got this eye cup which cushions your eye when you look through it. So this is the viewfinder, and this is what you would use if you were out taking photographs mainly. You would look through the viewfinder. This is the menu button. So this is the button you can get to the beginning by using this wheel here. So the menu button is to change your settings on the camera. I'll show you that later. You've got the information button. The information button is mainly used for when you're playing back your images to have a look at the information. So if you click on it once, it shows you the histogram, it shows you the image, it tells you what settings you had for that particular image. And then you can click on it again and it shows you the full image. Click on it again, it gives you these settings. So you can just flick through just by clicking on it a few times to get that. So if you find you're on this setting and you want to see the full image, you just click on the information button and it'll change you back to the full image. So this button here, you can choose between video mode. You would swap it to there. So the little white icon is on the red little video icon. And then for the camera, you would switch it to there, and that'll give you the camera settings. So this start stop here, this is what you would start your record. So if you wanted to record, you would press that start stop, and you can see it's flashing, saying it's recording, and then you would stop it like that. So this is the setting that I'm using in the manual exposure settings here. So I've got it on, all of these settings are look. If you're not used to using the DSLR, you'll not understand what these settings are at the moment. But these are the settings I'm using. But if I wanted to, instead of you have it on here when you're looking through there. So if you wanted to look at this screen, you would have to press the start stop button to get that screen to come on. So this button here is the AF autofocus on button. Mine is disabled, and I can't use it unless I take away the setting for the shutter button. So the shutter button, when you press it halfway, it focuses on your subject. But if you rather have this focusing on your subject, it's called the AF on button, but you can change it in the settings so that this is the focusing button, and then you can have your shutter button just to take the image straight away. And you can also have the half press as something else, like the AE lock, for example. I haven't set mine up to have this as a focusing button. I prefer just to use it as it is, but a lot of people decide to have this button at the back as the focusing button so that they can take a shot quicker by pressing that button. But that's your choice. But mine isn't working for that at the moment. This button here is the AE lock button, so you can lock the exposure, and then when you take the picture it'll take it at that particular exposure. It's got a little star on the top. Can you see that? A little star. So if you press it, you can see a little star appears to show you that you've got the exposure locked. And then when you take the picture, it locks the exposure to wherever. So for example, if it was like a lot of like bright light behind your subject, if it was very sunny and the light was very bright behind your subject, if you focused on your subject and then if you locked the exposure and then you reframed your camera so it focused on their face or whatever, it would keep that exposure that you already had for the face, because it would lock it. So that's what the AE lock is. So it's that little star here. So the last button on the top is the magnifying button. So let me just pull this out just to show you a bit better. So let's just get rid of that for now. So let me just focus on this clock at the back, and I'll just zoom you in a bit more. You can see my screen a bit better. Let's move this out the way. So if I was going to focus on that clock, let's say on the number 6, like that. So that's automatic focus. It's turned green because I've half pressed the shutter, haven't fully pressed the shutter, and that's telling me, because it's a green square around it, that the camera says that's focused. I haven't got the light balance right, so I'm just going to make that balanced in the middle there. Can you see that little scale thing that pops up here? So I'm getting that balanced in the middle, so I know it's going to be exposed right. If your hand holding a camera, the shutter speed should at least match the lens length that you're using. So this lens I'm using is a 32mm lens. Oh, what lens is it? I think it's a 35mm lens, I should say. So because this is a 35mm lens, I'm going to have to change the shutter speed so it's at least 30mm. I'm going to change it to 40, but you can see now my scale, this has turned red, and my scale has gone right down to right at the bottom. So that means it's going to be too dark, the image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to change my ISO or change the aperture. I can't change the aperture because that's as low as it goes. So I'm going to have to change the ISO. So I've got the ISO at 200 at the moment. So I'm just going to press the ISO button and I'm just going to drop it down to automatic. So then when I turn the shutter speed up, the ISO I'll have to change as well. So I'm going to have it at 40, and I'm going to make sure the aperture is at my highest, which is 2.8. I've got it focused on the clock. I've got the little green square pop up to tell me it's ready to take the image. I've got it balanced in the center, and it's gone up to 640 ISO. So I'm just going to take that image. So to use the magnifying button, you would have to have your lens, this is on automatic focus, put on manual focus just by sliding that along. Normally lenses have your stabilizer. You can either have your stabilizer on and off. I've got that on, or you can have an automatic focus or manual focus. So I've got this on manual focus. So to focus this clock, I'm going to press this little button at the end here, the magnifier button, and you can see straight away on my live view here that I've got the image of the pointers even bigger, and I can even go in even further by pressing again on the magnifying button. So it's got 3 settings, that setting, that setting and that setting, and then you go back to the beginning. So I'm going on to this setting here, and then I'm just going to turn the focusing wheel till I think it's focused perfectly. I think that's about right, and then I just hit that magnifying button again, and then I take the shot. So if we have a look at the first, so if we just zoom in to look at the live screen, so this was the shot I've just taken with the manual focus. So you can see it's very well focused there. We'll zoom out. You have to zoom out to be able to go back to the other image. So then using the dial, I'll go back to the first image I took the image of. This was automatic focus. So you might think that the manual focus takes a better picture than the automatic focus. So if you flick between the two, you can decide for yourself what you think. I think the manual focus is probably a bit better than the autofocus, but it's a bit more fiddly, obviously. I usually take my images with the autofocus for speed, really. If I had more time, I would use the manual focus. So if you were in live view, you can move this around, like using it like a joystick. You can move it, you know, different directions to get the place you want to focus on. Or you can just tap the screen as well. You know, you don't have to use that. And then we've got the Q button. So the Q button has all the settings on it, and I tend to use the Q button quite a lot if I want to change a setting. So you press on the Q button, and from here you can change your settings. So for example, if you wanted to, you just press on this, and you can change which one of these you wanted to change. You can change it to one shot or servo. You can change whether you just want a single image, or if you want multiple, continuous, high speed continuous, or if you want the timer on. And then you can choose the metering mode. You can choose what size image you want, whether you wanted it on raw image or JPEGs or raw and JPEGs. You can choose what white balance you want. You can choose the picture style, the auto light optimizer, so just by pressing the Q button you can choose what you want. That's the Q button. This button, like if we were wanting to say customizing, if if we wanted to say change the settings on anything. So your image quality, for example, you would find what you wanted and then you would press the set button and that would set it. Just going to change that back again. And you can move through the menu using these buttons here, like this middle one here and this bottom one. So if we go back to this, if we go back to this bottom one, we can change the aperture with this one. So you change the shutter speed with this one and you change the aperture with this one. So we've got play, that shows you the last image, and you can cycle through these using this button here. And then we've got bin, you can delete it if you want to delete it. You can erase just the JPEG and keep the RAW, or erase both the JPEG and the RAW. So I think I'll erase the JPEG and keep the RAW. And this is the lock. So if you've got it on lock, so if you try to change the settings, it says locked. So that if that ever happens to you, you need to take it off lock. So you just push that down to take it off lock and push it up to put it on lock. So on the bottom of the camera you've got the slot for the battery, so you just pull that open and you can get the battery out just by pushing that little white lever, and then the battery comes out. I did buy a separate charger to charge these batteries with, and I've got about 3 or 4 of these batteries now. They do last a long time though, probably the longest lasting battery I've had for a camera before. With photographs, you know, if I go out a day shooting, one of these batteries will last me the whole day, but if you take videos, obviously they're not going to last as long as that. And it just slots in and you just press it in till that little white thing clicks and then shut the door. So that's the battery. So this little hole here is if you were going to attach the camera to a tripod. So you would have a plate like this. This is a plate from one of my tripods. I do have 3 different tripods. And what you do is just got a screw there. So you just screw that into the bottom of the camera, and then this plate gets slotted into the tripod. So on this side you've got where you would put your SD card. So it's got like a grip that you pull forward and open, and then the SD card goes in that slot. So you just push it down till it clicks, and then you can shut the door. And on the other side you've got these other places where you can put things, like you've got a mic where you can put a mic. It does have an inbuilt mic, but if you wanted to use an external mic you could use that port. And then headphones has got a headphone port. And then this little hole here is for like a remote, like if you were using a remote, a wired remote, like if you were doing a time lapse or something like that, you could use that port. And this one we've got the HDMI port here, and this one's the digital port here. So I've shown you all of the buttons, all of the ports, where the battery goes, the SD card, the lens. I've shown you the front of the camera, the back of the camera, the top of the camera, underneath the camera. It has been a long video because there's been so much to tell you. The next video I'm going to go in detail about all the different settings, you know, so all the different camera settings that you can, if you go into the menu. So I'm going to go through all of those settings in the next video. So until the next video, bye for now.